What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Bonfire. You're probably thinking to yourself, this isn't Alan's intro. Who is this guy? Well, my name's Matt, aka M Shaves, and I'm honored today to be your host. Alongside me, we have two of the finest people in the Chicago Fire fandom. Number one, Mr. DJ. How are you today?
I just realized I need to get a burger.
DJ needs to get a burger. Another incredible one-liner. I hope your cheeseburger is really good. I just watched the menu last night. If you haven't seen that movie, they have the best looking cheeseburger you'll ever see. DJ, go watch that movie. And of course, alongside DJ is Mr. Timothy Hutz. Hutz? How you doing, man?
Hotsy, yeah, good. Yeah, we've only known each other like 2 years, so. Yeah, no, things are good, man. The sun is shining. It's still colder out, but like this is way better than what it felt like early January was. We're recording this February 1. Just so everyone can get a frame of reference. And it's nice. It's feels like February is going to be a much better month.
If it makes you feel better, Tim, your last name will not be the only last name I butcher on this show. It's just who I am.
It's just the way it is. I love you. I completely understand. But by the way, it feels like it's a little mean when somebody's like, I need a burger. And you're like, oh, here's a delicious burger you can look at, but not eat.
You're right, but I will say though that burger made me want to like reach into my TV and get it. But that's like the biggest tangent I've ever seen on this show. Great movie, highly recommend. DJ, after this recording, go get a cheeseburger. But we got a lot to talk about today, and I want to kick things off by talking about what I believe is the greatest news in the history of Chicago Fireland. And that's the Fire will compete in the 2025 U.S. Open Cup this year. And more interestingly, will not compete in the 2025 Leagues Cup this year. I'd love to hear your feelings about this. Tim, how do you feel? Are you happy? Does it feel good? Walk me through it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good news. Like last year, I was kind of the point person for our coverage on the Open Cup story as it was developing, back and forth between U.S. Soccer and MLS. And I think a lot of people were concerned that it was maybe like the death knell of the Open Cup. So to go from the 8 teams from MLS that we had last year to 16 this year, I don't love everything about this. Like I wish all 27 US based teams were in the Open Cup. And it's weird because it puts the Leagues Cup a little bit above the Open Cup in the hunting order because of the way that it works. Matt, do you want to get into the new format and stuff like that?
Yeah, actually, Tim, if you could touch on that, that's great. I looked at the bracket and really didn't know what I was looking at.
The Club World Cup is happening this year in the United States, and there are 2 U.S.-based teams involved, the Seattle Sounders and Inter Miami. We can talk about that at some other point. But between that, CONCACAF Champions Cup and the Leagues Cup, along with the Open Cup, that is a lot of competitions in addition to a 34-game season that some teams would be in. I mean, the Seattle Sounders were potentially going to be in 5 separate competitions this year, as were
That's
Miami.
Crazy.
Right. As was LAFC if they were able to defend their Open Cup title. And I wish that rosters in MLS were bigger. I think we all kind of do. But with a 20-man senior roster and 10 supplemental roster spots, there's just no way to play 50 games in 9 months and not have players get injured and stuff like that. So the compromise is that basically teams can play in 2 national or continental cup competitions. So for Canadian teams, that's the Canadian Championship and then one other. They kind of lucked out not having to have Canadian Championship, CONCACAF Champions Cup, and Leagues Cup this year. And in future years, if Canadian teams do better, we may see that change. And all the US-based teams, which is 27 out of 30, it's 2 of them. So it's basically by default, you're in the US Open Cup. It's kind of the way that it ends up working. If you're also in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, that counts as your second. And if you're in the Leagues Cup, that would be a third. So one of those doesn't happen. The kind of related, the Leagues Cup format also changed. It went from every MLS team being involved to only 18 MLS teams are involved. That matches exactly the number of teams in Liga MX. So it's 18 on 18 now. In the new format, it's going to be all MLS versus Liga MX all the way up to the quarterfinal. which is kind of a cool change, I think, and should make for like fewer like games where it was like there was one in Austin. It was like Mazatlan versus I can't remember who, and like there were like 200 people there.
Yeah, it was like 3,000, I think was the official attendance or something like that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. If there's 3,000 people there, then like I am 27 feet tall. Like, but so that ends that. Now, the downside, of course, is that not every US-based team is in the Open Cup. And if you've qualified for CONCACAF Champions Cup, which is sort of, I think, the premier competition, and if you were a playoff team last year, because that's the 18 teams that get to the Leagues Cup, then you don't get to play in the Open Cup. And that includes LAFC, who don't get to defend their title.
100%. It's a really interesting breakdown. There's a lot of potential games to play. But DJ, no Seattle, no Sporting in US Open Cup. Is this the year that the Fire can finally get over to 5?
I'm going to need a bleep word, Austin, but Italy, yes. I mean, this is the thing. Seattle and Sporting are the two teams that I wish the Fire would beat in the final, but it's a really good chance for the Fire this year. I don't really think there's many teams that stand really, like, not teams that are going to be very big in the Cup. There are a lot of weaker teams, a lot of next pro teams, so because they're in the Fire only in one tournament, if they can focus on that one tournament, then yeah, there's no reason why they shouldn't win.
I 100% agree with you. My first reaction when I looked at the 16 teams that are playing in Open Cup is 95% of these teams I feel confident in our roster beating in a semifinal or a final. There's no, juggernauts like I don't think Atlanta's in it. That might be the one exception. LAFC, no Galaxy, no Miami, none of the guys that you see marketed all the times. So it's the perfect opportunity to go out there, not only bring a trophy to the city that has not won a trophy since, 2016 now? Yeah, Cubs were the last trophy, right? Sounds about right.
Yep.
But also be the first MLS team to get to 5 Open Cups.
I'd like
the
Chicago Sky Eraser, yeah. Just completely erase them.
Tim said, oh, I'm like, oh God.
No men's trophies since 2021. So like, yeah, it's and I mean, obviously the Chicago Fire have not won a major trophy since the 2006 Open Cup. So, that was a crazy opening decade, four wins in 8 years, but since then, not the same running. It's not going to be a cakewalk though. I mean, there are some
absolutely not.
The Red Bulls are in there. They obviously made it to MLS Cup final and they made it a good game out of it. I think that like FC Dallas has a lot of talent this year. I mean, Austin spent over $10 million on $10 million a piece on 2 players that they have brought in. So it's going to be a better Austin team than I think we've seen in the past couple of years. Still some questions about how they play. Orlando City have been pretty good and we're a playoff team and look like they're going to be a playoff team again. Like NYCFC can be good. Like don't want to count them out. And like even like the San Jose Earthquakes who won the Wooden Spoon last year. They brought in Bruce Arena and Bruce Arena is convincing. Basically brought over most of the New England Revolution team from 2021 that was on pace for 68 points at one point. So that
was actually something I was thinking of when I saw the teams. The Earthquakes and the Fire are the 2 teams that would most benefit from winning the Open Cup this year to try and reestablish themselves. And I fully expect San Jose is going to go big time on the Open Cup just because Arena knows that's the easiest one to win.
Same thing with the Fire. Yeah, I mean, it would be huge to get a trophy in Greg Berhalter's first year, as it would for Bruce Arena, as it would for any of the other teams that have really reworked the squad. Charlotte are in there, they've been a playoff team the past couple seasons. Well, not
and their roster looks better now too. Yeah. They got Wilfred Zaha, so they're going to be a big threat.
Yeah, exactly. They're a big threat. They looked solid under Dean Smith last year. It's not going to be a cakewalk, but still, it's it's going to be. The Fire start in the round of 32. All the MLS teams do. They will face a lower division opponent in the round of 32. And I can confirm they do have hosting priority for that match. So
awesome.
Yeah. So it's a relatively short path to a championship game and then winning a trophy after that. If they can, manage to get just a couple steps farther than they have in recent seasons, like they made it to the semis. Was that in 2019, or was that the quarters?
When we lost to
So-
Houston 4-0.
No, 2019.
Oh,
2018 is last time we were in the
2018, sorry.
semifinals.
Yes.
20 and the thing too was before from 2018 starting in like 2011 the Fire were basically in the semifinals every season but two, which
That's-
ironically were the two best seasons in the Fire's history.
That's absolutely wild. It's our heritage. It's something that obviously the Fire community is really proud of. Our 4 Open Cups. It's games we love going to. Some of my best memories have been from going to Open Cup games. We get to make our posters again. If you haven't seen our posters before, which is really really exciting. So it's a great opportunity for the club, for Triple G to get a trophy and his first win. And you would imagine that the stars are aligning and the Fire are going to take it very seriously, but that remains to be seen. Do we know, we should know this, when the US Open Cup is formally starting?
I would have to look up the schedule on that. I don't think that dates have been announced.
Well, first round, March 18th to 20th. I just answered my own question.
I think we both looked at Wikipedia at the same time, didn't we?
Yeah, sounds about right. Well, so the Fire will get to get 4 or 5 games underneath their belt before they start their Open Cup schedule. Hopefully, all these new additions who you might not see in the early rounds will get their feet wet, get settled, and get ready to make a big run. But like we said, great opportunity, and I think all 3 of us in the entire Fire community are just very, very happy to be back. So that's a great way to just start off an episode. Some good news, because it's not often on these Fire podcasts that you get to talk about good news all the time. In other news, there has been a ton of player movement, some of which you guys have already unofficially discussed on the last Quickfire that has moved officially, and some stuff that is completely new since our last official podcast. The first one, the golden ticket one that everyone's probably seen, everyone was talking about, it was the talk of the town, was Neymar, who is not joining the Chicago Fire. I believe it was 2 days ago, as of time of the recording, where he was officially announced at Santos on a loan deal. I'm curious, and I want to start off with DJ. Were you team Neymar in the first place? Is this a signing that you would have been excited about? No.
Like here's Tim and I discussed this. From a marketing perspective, that was a great sign. That would be an amazing sign. Bringing in one of the greatest players of the last 15 years, 100% great signing. From a playing perspective, you would have been paying him to sit in his house with an injured ankle. Like, that's legitimately what you would have been paying him for. He hasn't played a game. He hasn't played 90 minutes since October of 2023. And he likely would have been on a DP deal rivaling, if not higher than, Messi's. And that's... I understand, Joe, that's your money, but no, that is a waste of money. That is not...
Tim, obviously, winter window didn't work out for Neymar. Do you think this is a situation where the Fire will take another stab at it after his loan expires with Santos? Or do you think the Neymar vision for our entire community is 100% out the window? What do you think?
I think it's probably gone. I mean, to be honest, we talked to Greg Berhalter a couple days ago as the time that we're recording. And, the question came up, like, how serious was the team about Neymar? And Berhalter kind of was like, I don't know how much I can say about this, which I thought was sort of weird because he's the director of football. So, like, who's he going to get in trouble with, right? But it might have involved, like, the situation with Santos, and he didn't know if that was official or not yet. But he said, look, I can be pretty confident that we offered him more money than would have been on offer anywhere else. And so we were 100% committed to it. I don't think you say that if you're planning on giving an offer like that again. Now, Neymar's only there for 6 months. I don't know how you guys feel about it. It's felt to me like Neymar is very much kind of like all about the money. Like, not all about the money, but like money certainly is probably his native language, and Portuguese is second. So it was surprising that he went to Santos, but can't pay him nearly what the Fire were offering. And I do wonder, after 6 months of that, is he going to, have one of his people be like, look, man, like, you're spending a lot of money and you're not making a lot of money. Like, you need to go and do something to make some more money or cut your expenses. And then he maybe comes back talking to the Fire. I still don't know if they want to continue that. I almost wonder if at that point Inter Miami might be a possibility, and the Fire could then, I assume the Fire still hold his discovery rights, which I know discovering Neymar. Wow, great job, Chicago Fire. But they would then be able to sell that to Miami for the motherload of GAM, or like one of like the biggest MLS trades of all time. You know what I mean? It'd be like GAM, a U22 player, like a couple, like, you know what I mean? Like just whatever, like one of those like MLS trades that's like 6 things in exchange for the rights to Neymar, which would work out for the Fire. And I think that, you know, that's something that, you know, Fire community should be pretty happy with.
That's probably the best case scenario.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of you. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of people ultimately upset that Neymar is not in Chicago because it's at the end of the day Neymar. But I also fall into the bucket of I'm comfortable with Neymar not being a part of my club. Not saying I wouldn't enjoy it, but like DJ walked us through, there's a lot of potential negatives that might arise from a signing of that hire. Regardless, obviously, wish him the best at Santos. When he's on his game, he is one of the world's best players. And I hope that he has some success back there in Brazil because Prime, as a Real Madrid fan, watching Prime Neymar absolutely destroy Real Madrid growing up was a beautiful thing to watch. I don't know if you guys are big Barca guys or anything like that.
I will say, if this was Neymar and like right after the World Cup, 100%, this would be like the best deal ever.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, the last
Neymar.
thing about it that I think does help is it did make the news around the world. Like people, I mean, not just around the world, but also like it made all of the news in Chicago. Like it made like NBC News's, you know, nightly broadcast and NBC5. It made WGN's news broadcast, right? Like, so that got the Fire name out there. And it also got the Fire name out there for players. And I do kind of wonder if that, you know, maybe helps a little bit with recruitment because I think most players around the world have heard of MLS at this point. They may not know a lot more about it than that. But a lot of them probably haven't heard of the Chicago Fire or haven't thought about the team. And now just having, you know, the team linked with the name that big, I think maybe it's like, oh, this is a club that can be serious. Now, does that mean that like some guy that the Fire are trying to sign for like, you know, $600K a year or something like that comes in as like, well, we'd like you to offer what you offered Neymar? Maybe. But, you know, I think that Greg and Mikey can handle that.
100%. Yeah, it shows at bare minimum that Joe is prepared to do whatever it takes to win. And I think sometimes we forget that we support a team in the third biggest sports market in the entire United States. We're commonly overshadowed by New York and by LA. So it's very refreshing to see a Chicago sports team acting like the big market that they are and that they should be. Because there's no other team really in the city that's doing that. So although it didn't happen, you're right. Maybe it'll help recruitment. Maybe it will help, you know, other aspects of the sporting world. But it didn't happen, and maybe it will happen. Maybe it won't. We don't know. We'll have to wait till the summer to find out. But that's not the only transfer news we have going on. That was obviously a failed transfer. And since the last time you guys filmed a quick fire, Jonathan Bamba, our DP winger, officially signed with the club as of today, February 1st, like Tim said. He's actually in Ottawa, Canada right now, according to his Instagram story. We don't really know why. We're predicting some visa issues, but Jonathan Bamba's official. How are we feeling about that signing? Confident? Is it a slam dunk hire? We spent a lot of time on Hot Takes talking about if it's a slam dunk DP, and I'd be curious to hear both of your opinions on that. How excited are you to watch the Frenchman run up the wings at Soldier Field?
Well, he's not French, he's Ivorian.
Ivorian, excuse me. Oh my God. Oh my God. Told you not
he
to,
does
not
have
the
French
first slip up I'll
citizenship,
have.
though, so you were not wrong, Matt.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, he played for Lille for 7 years. He's got to be French.
No,
That's
he grew up. He spent a lot of time in France. He's got French citizenship. He was born in Côte d'Ivoire, and his parents are from Mali, and he plays for the Mali national team. So
thank you for making me feel better, Tim. I appreciate you.
Yeah,
that's Kumane.
Oh, why am I thinking?
Oh, okay. No. Now I don't feel nearly as bad. But Bamba,
no, Bamba was actually born in France, but he does also have Côte d'Ivoire citizenship. So
and he plays for the national team for Côte d'Ivoire. Yes,
right.
Got it.
Not the guy that was born in Côte d'Ivoire who plays for the national team in Mali.
Not confusing whatsoever. But I'm really glad we got that out of the way because that is a web of craziness. But DJ, Jonathan Bamba, are you happy with this? Do you think that's like the level of DP you want to see come out of Joe Mansueto, or do you just have to wait and see?
Wait and see. I've seen the play too many times. Like here's the way I always kind of say it. Whenever the Fire sign a DP, there's 3 possibilities. You either get Torres and Castillo, which are the worst DPs of all time. You get Shaqiri and, like, trying to think off the top of my head, like Katai, which were mid-level DPs. They weren't great, but they weren't terrible, like horrifyingly bad like the others. Or you get David Akam and Bastian Schweinsteiger and Nemanja and Blanco, the greatest of all time. I think worst case scenario, Bamba just is middle of the road. Best case scenario, you're talking about David Akam.
Hey, if he's worst case scenario, David Akam, in my opinion, that's success because he is a very underrated player in our history. Tim, is there any timeline on Bamba getting into Chicago? Like, when is he expected to be with the team? What do you think about him overall?
You know, I don't think that anyone knows. I'm a little surprised by the France, to Canada to maybe the US move that he seems to have been making just in terms of geography. Because the work visa would, be processed by, I'm assuming, the US Embassy in France. So who knows? Maybe he just has family there or something like that and stopping to say hi before joining the team. But no exact timeline on him joining the team. I was told that he was expected to be there for part of the Coachella Valley Invitational. I don't, but again, this is all sort of depending on visas working the way that people expect them to work. And right now, I think just to look at a newspaper and that may or may not be the case with what's actually happening. But yeah, I think you had asked a really good question, Matt. Is he a slam dunk DP signing? Because I think I don't think anyone is, right? I think that a lot of us thought Shaqiri would be. I mean, you had Matt Doyle and a lot of names around the league being oh yeah, this guy's going to get 10 goals and 10 assists easy and maybe double that, right? That never happened for Shaqiri in Chicago. So I think we have to be cautious, but I think some people I've heard seem to be almost disappointed with the fact that he came in on quote unquote only a $2 million transfer fee. Transfer Market had him rated as a $20 million transfer just 18 months ago. His contract previously, I think, had him paid a lot more than Cadiz, his former team, was really comfortable paying. And I think they were willing to move on just to get that off their books because they went from being top flight to being second division. They don't look like they're going to get relegated, but it's not 1,000% out of the question this year. And I think that they're just in a place where they were needing to shed salary, and he had a very big salary. And, the manager changed and didn't really fit in with the new system as well. I think he'll fit in with Greg's system very well. Greg's systems have always thrived on dynamic wingers, and he really does bring that. And he will just give Hugo Kuipers so much, well, one, better service, and two, just that having that secondary threat around him. Kuipers is going to be able to get in behind lines. He's going to be able to get exactly where he wants to be in prime scoring position a lot more. And I think that, Bamba is the kind of guy that will get the ball to him when necessary. And I think that it will make, guys like Guti look a lot better too. Just having multiple passing options that can then go on to score or, pass and set up the assist.
With the signing of Bamba underway and official, it looks like our front three is set, at least for now. Maybe the Fire bring in another winger based off their interest of Neymar, and maybe they envisioned him as a 10. But right now, it looks like the front line's looking Bamba, Kuipers, and Zinkernagel or Marin Halassi, which is not bad. It's a good place. But we got some work to do in other places, which Greg Berhalter has been working hard on.
By the way, I would assume that Zinkernagel would be the third winger.
Fine with me.
Yeah, ahead of Marin at this point.
Marin.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think that a lot of players, Marin sort of became quieter during, I think, fairly long stretches of last season. I think that the idea of him coming off and actually being an impact player off the bench could be huge for the Fire. Because that is one thing that they have not really had on any consistent basis in recent seasons is players that can come off the bench, give you 20, 30 minutes, when opposing defenses are tired and stuff like that, and really change the game. And, Marin with fresh legs is going to be faster than pretty much anybody else out there.
That too is the problem with that statement too is that's because the ones that should have been like Herbert's were the ones starting, which is why I think I agree. Marin could be the way Herbert should have been.
That Jiggly actually had a great line about that, which is the Fire have great bench players. It's just that they call them starters.
Yep. 100%. It's a good problem to have that guys like Marin now have to fight for their spot and have to come off the bench. That's how you raise the ceiling of what your team's capable of. Now, that's sort of bench level depth that we need to be successful. It might not be there for the midfield or the defense quite yet, maybe for the fullbacks. But for the midfield specifically, obviously the Fire recently announced the signing, the addition of Romige Kouame on loan from Cadiz CF in the Spanish second division, a guy who's going to come in there, most likely start at the beginning of the season, maybe not, depending on who else the Fire bring in. But this is a guy I personally knew absolutely nothing about, and I'd be curious to know if you guys were like that or if your Spanish Division II knowledge is great. But he seems like a guy, based off the Cadiz feedback that we've seen on social media, that I've seen on social media, a guy who's really talented but might have some off-field issues that are going to be difficult to navigate. Romige Kouame, what's he going to bring to this team from a skill perspective and from a depth perspective as well? Tim, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, what I just realized, amongst other things, is I got Celta de Vigo mixed up with Cadiz in my mind. So I
heard you say that, and I got so confused. But I'm like, I'm just going to let him get back on track.
Yeah, no, and I just never did. So Kouame, who is coming from Cadiz in the second level, but I think Celta de Vigo is the same situation with what I said about Bamba's salary, where he came in on a very high salary after like an awesome career at Lille, that, during that season when they were just so much fun to watch, and didn't quite live up to it under a new manager. Now, Cadiz did get relegated, and I think that's why they were letting it go on loan. DJ, you pointed this out like when we were talking earlier, but there was a rumor that after the Bamba signing went through, and I think that they saw it's like, oh, you have money. And again, that may be like a Neymar related thing. They wanted to make it a sale, not a loan. I'm glad that the Fire held it to a loan. I think he should be a good partner for Kellen Acosta in the midfield. I don't know if he is going to be a complete game changer. Like, that's not to say that he's not going to. He very well could be, but I'm not sure that he has the highest ceiling possible of anyone that you want in the midfield. And like, we've seen the way that like Frank's teams work with like the national team and with Columbus before that, where having guys that can both take up a lot of space on defense and also, start like controlling the ball and serve a good ball through in the D mid is really crucial to the way that he wants to play. So, maybe he's the permanent solution. The Fire will have an option to buy him if they want, but I honestly don't know if they've been able to get this done for under a DP level if it was a sale. So it was good that they sort of held firm, kept him under that threshold. And I think that the timeline on this probably got accelerated because I don't believe that they really were looking to move on from Fetty as quickly as they were. I think the opportunity came up. It was good for Fetty. It was good for what his family wanted. And I think it gave, like, I think that they didn't, they weren't committed to having Fetty Navarro be like a cornerstone of the team for ages. But I think that they weren't planning on moving on from him this window. And so when that opportunity came, they needed to accelerate a plan to bring someone in, and they did it in a way that doesn't break the bank.
Which I have to give props to Greg for, considering how many times in the last, 15 years have we heard the Fire massively overpaid for a player like Federico Pupo, or they refused to pay enough for a player like Juan Fernando Quintero. And it's nice to see Greg's like, here's your offer, this is what you're getting. When it's like, team says, no, we need a lot more than that, ridiculously more. You can take this or leave it, which you want.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's one reason that, like, bringing in 11 signings like he has, like from all over the place, right? Like Jack Elliott from inside MLS. You've got, Barroso from Portugal. You've got players from Spain. Like it's, and so having multiple options and being in a place where you can say, all right, look, this is what we're offering. And it's, it's okay. We've got a backup guy that we actually, like we think this other guy could have a higher upside. It's just less of a certain deal. So like, if you don't want to take this, then fine, we'll move on. I think that's a good way to like manage it. And it looks like they've been making enough signings where they can credibly say like, okay, well, we've got other targets, so we'll move on if, this isn't going to work out for you.
So we're most likely going to see a lot of Kouame beginning of the season because there isn't that center mid depth that we've been talking about. And we'll see how good the scouting is going to be for Triple G's team. Is this going to be, like Tim said, is this going to be a guy that is serviceable, or is he going to really raise the ceiling of what these teams capable? But that's the second signing that we've made since our last conversation on the Bonfire. The third one, which I think, in my opinion, is actually the most interesting, is the Fire formally announced the signing of homegrown midfielder 15-year-old Robert Turdine to the second largest homegrown deal in history, right behind the Philadelphia Union's Kevon Sullivan. This is a 15-year-old who will occupy slot 31 on the Fire's roster, meaning he will only, at maximum, play 6 MLS games this season, but that's okay. He's 15. He doesn't need to play the full summer or the full season. And of course, we'll have an unlimited number of non-MLS appearances, so we could see him in the Open Cup and probably in Next Pro at some point. Robert Turdine, second largest homegrown deal in history. What does this mean from a Greg Berhalter perspective, like focused on the academy? How does this one make you guys feel?
I mean, it makes me think that there's been a lot of talk from Greg about implementing like the second team, the academy, making a pathway from the academy to the second team to the first team. This is the big one. The only other players you can consider are like Christopher Cupps and Vitaly Hilut, maybe. But I mean, this is the big one.
Yeah, so Kevin Sullivan is, the biggest name in like literally a generation to come out of U.S. soccer at that age group. Now, obviously, we know that like the biggest name at that age group doesn't guarantee a successful career or anything like that. And Turdine is the name that is normally mentioned like after that. Sullivan is in a category all by himself. So, like, I don't want to be like, it's 1A and 1B here. It's like clearly, Turdine is not at that same level, but he has an incredibly high ceiling. He could work out incredibly well for the Fire. And like, he hasn't even really, like, the thing is, like, he hasn't been a Fire 2 starter yet. You know what I mean? So giving him a first term contract is I think huge for him. I think it's huge for what the organization wants to do. And one thing about Joe Mansueto, from like the top down, it's been this idea that like the Fire are going to grow through the academy, that there's going to be Chicago natives playing for the team when they win championships and trophies and stuff like that. And this just, I think, like helps show that vision. And Turdine is a guy that obviously he was playing soccer before Joe Mansueto bought the team, but like he wasn't academy aged or anything like that. Like, so like unlike guys like Guti where, or like, Maury Pineda, where their development really happened before Joe Mansueto bought the team. Like, this is a guy that kind of stayed in the Fire Academy, which was not something that a lot of guys did back in the day. Like that academy definitely had people leaving for other places like Soccer's and stuff like that in Chicago. Have a guy stay in the academy and commit to playing with the team professionally, like at this age, it says something about just how the academy is humming in a way that it hadn't been in previous years.
If he is as good as our last 15-year-old homegrown in Gaga Slonina, then the Fire community has good reason to be patient, because that was a great signing. And anytime you throw that much money at a 15-year-old, you're obviously very confident in his ability to grow and develop and be a star, honestly, in MLS. So a really intriguing one by Triple G. And on the flip side, we've had a few departures as well. I know Tim touched on Fede Navarro leaving to Argentina, Rosario Central, reportedly around $5 million, which is an incredibly high fee in my opinion.
I think that was a misreading. I think that was a misread of what happened. I think that somebody in Spanish called him a $5 million player, which is what the Fire paid to receive him. Having said that, I am told that the cap hit is cleared and the U22 slot is available for the Fire, which means that they covered at least enough of like what would that be, a quarter of the 5 million that he came in. So, I think that's a good solution for a guy that I think hadn't really even been a key rotational piece for the Fire for a lot over the past couple seasons. I think he had that capability, and I think that I hope that he does that. I hope that he becomes a starter for Rosario, but it hadn't been happening for him in MLS.
Yeah, Osario, another really interesting name. That U22 slot, like you said, is key. There's been a lot about talk about, should we give it to Brady? Because Brady apparently wants to negotiate. What position do you think ultimately that U22 slot should be filled? DJ, what do you think?
Well, Tim pointed out to me, I forgot all about this. Brady cannot be a U22 because he's on his second contract.
You're right. Good point.
But with that said, honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing a U22 similar to Barroso, going just to a guy that's young, not having to worry. Like, ironically, I actually would not mind seeing the U22 slot going to the Italian Claudio Cassano, as his name, coming to Fire 2. Situation like that, where it's a guy you're wanting for the future versus someone you're bringing in automatically, like Navarro.
Yeah.
Tim, you know what I mean? That U22 slot's valid. What do you think? Center back?
I mean, we're a few years into the U22 program, and we'll talk about this in a bit, but the Fire have landed one of the biggest success of that program by one measure. But around the league, it hasn't really worked out the way that I think a lot of teams thought it would, because, if you're bringing in a 19-year-old guy, your MLS teams are competing both financially and in scouting against every club in the world. They're competing against, the top teams in Europe, and they're trying to identify talent and offer them a better deal, more incentive to come. But a lot of, a lot of players are going to choose to go to Europe, even if it's not as good of a deal, because then you're in Europe, maybe you're in the Champions League, maybe that facilitates that move to a super club Inter or Man City or
Aston
whatever,
Villa.
right? Or Aston Villa. I mean, they're definitely pushing to be a club in the Champions League this year. So, but so those, the bigger signings for the U22 program haven't worked out. I think that the ways to go about it are you get a 21-year-old guy, maybe not that far away from being 22, where they've played thousands of minutes at a senior level. And I think the other thing to do is just use what the Fire did with Guti, which is one of the first times that version of the U22 signing was used, which is give a guy in MLS his second deal. It has to be a homegrown player. Because before, if a guy was about to run out his first deal, you were limited with what you could do to keep them, because there was a salary max that you could get. They were no longer in a salary cap advantage part of the roster, meaning that there wasn't a sort of financially or cap friendly way to keep guys that you developed on the roster. And so some teams had to let them go earlier than they thought that they should, or for less than they thought that they were worth. So yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that Brady's already in a second deal and isn't eligible for that contract. But I think maybe holding it open for that kind of a situation is also something that the league could look into. But as you pointed out, with the Cassano move, the Fire could sign a player that has a second team deal to a U22 deal, because that would be their first MLS contract, is my understanding. And that can be a great use, because then you've had the player in, you know the player, you see how they train, not just highlights, but you get to know them and know the ins and outs of their game. And it gives you a chance to try guys out before committing that U22 slot and usually 3-4 year deals to them.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to get around this whole U22 fiasco going all over MLS. But in general, although Federico Navarro has left our club, we thank him for his service. 4 years of bully ball is the way I like to describe it. And we hope that he's successful back in Argentina, because it sounds like it's what he wanted. And ultimately, I'm grateful that Triple G gave him that right. Now, what we alluded to, both myself and Tim and DJ, about this whole U22 success story, is the Fire actually hold probably the greatest U22 success story in their history. And that's, of course, former Fire striker Jean Duran, who at the time of recording, I think is 24 hours removed from signing for Saudi club Al Nasser for 80 million from Aston Villa. And what's most interesting about that, although it's a interesting move from a sporting perspective, is the Fire will net over $8 million of that, with the 15%-ish sell-on percentage that they received when they initially transferred him to Villa. That is obviously a big move. There's a lot of angles we could look at this. What do you think about this move for Jean? And of course, what does this mean for the Fire from a financial perspective?
I mean, it's nice the fact that the Fire got a pretty big payday and now officially have the title. Largest transfer out of MLS in league history.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's the Fire.
Under 1,400 minutes in MLS for Jean Duran. And the Fire made over $30 million off of it.
This man went from playing against Union Omaha in the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup and playing badly against Union Omaha in the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup to being transferred to play with Cristiano Ronaldo for almost $80 million.
It's incredible. And, there's going to be a lot of people. Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
I don't watch the Saudi Pro League, but I'm hoping that we get social media highlights of Cristiano Ronaldo going into score, like maybe going into score like goal number 1,000 or something like that at some point. And then Jean Duran being like off on the other side of the box, like pointing down to his feet and giving like Ronaldo a sour face for not passing him the ball and letting him finish instead.
If you had told me that was on the table 2 years ago, I would have laughed at your face. But in general, a lot of people are going to question this move from a development perspective. But clearly, Jean is taking care of his family, getting that bag. And even if he stays in Saudi for 2 years, he'll be 23 years old. So he'll still have the opportunity to go back to Europe and play for the Real Madrids and PSGs of the world, of which he was both linked to at some point this offseason. So crazy move, great for the Fire financially. You imagine that money will be invested. That's now 30 million. And maybe that could be potential Neymar money. Who knows in the future?
That could also, by the way, go up a little bit more because there are incentives and add-ons in his sale.
Yep.
And so the Fire would be in line to get 15% of any of the add-ons that hit. We don't know what they are. We don't know how much they're for, but that number could creep up a little bit higher.
In general, just a crazy scenario for the Fire, but I'm very grateful that it's happening to our club. Like I mentioned in the beginning, it's not often we get to talk about good news, so it's fun to actually have multiple segments with good news in it. The good news actually doesn't continue here. At the time of recording, the Fire have played 2 preseason games, one against Fortaleza from Brazil and one against Sporting KC. And although both of them weren't streamed, some of us may or may not have been able to get a sneak peek into the Fortaleza game. The Fire lost 1-0. They played decent in their first scrimmage, not as well in the second half, and the offense, like we've seen in past years, was pretty non-existent at times throughout the half. Did you guys get the opportunity to see any of this? What were your overall feelings coming out of that 1-0 loss?
I saw the second half, and defense was decent enough. There were some moments where you're like, what are you doing? But, I mean, it was fine. The offense, however, was so horrible.
The one thing I will say is at that point, the team had 4 training sessions under Greg Berhalter.
Yeah.
Like, that is very early. And so I was impressed with just how many good things that we saw. You mentioned Christopher Cupps earlier, Matt. Like, he has looked fantastic, and multiple people have called him out unbidden. I asked Jack Elliott about him. He said that he has a tremendous vision. He's good with his feet. He's strong for a player that age. I think it was Zinkernagel that mentioned how good he looked and Zinkernagel's been in training for what is like a week at this point. Like it's been pretty incredible to see. So he looked good, but the defense looks solid. Offense takes a little bit longer to get put together, but we did see that later on against a different opponent. So I was just impressed.
It's also important to note that, of course, Hugo Kuipers didn't play at all that game, so your star striker doesn't play. Of course, it's naturally going to affect your offense. Same with Zinkernagel, same with Bamba, same with Marin might have played a little bit towards the end of it. And it's also important to note that Fortaleza isn't exactly a slouch of an opponent. I believe last year they finished 4th in the Brazilian league, and I'm looking at their transfer market right now. David Luiz apparently plays for Fortaleza, which I think is really funny, along with former MLSers Tomas Pochettino, son of. Am I making that up?
He's not related to the U.S. men's national
team. Not related. That's right. Nope. I'm totally making that up.
There
and
is
also
Poch's son does play somewhere, but that's not him.
It's not Tomas. And there's also Mateus Rosetto, who most recently played for Atlanta, I believe, as a DP. So a good team, a quality team, and a won or loss ultimately when you're starting half academy kids and guys that are going to get time with Fire too after 4 days of training is really not that bad. And on the flip side, about a week later, I think it was, they play Sporting KC down in West Palm. And what it appears, they just absolutely pummeled them. A 2-0 win. Zinkernagel and Barroso got into the camp at that point. They started, played 30 minutes. Zinkernagel scored. And if you didn't see it on social media, a beautiful little goal. There's some controversy on who actually was the assist. Some folks are saying Dean. Some folks are saying our academy guy, whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, Hayut. Yes, Tim?
I have been saying it's closer to like Hayut, but I'm not saying that right either. So,
the
we can call him
academy
Vita.
kid that plays at left wing.
Yeah, Vita.
Vitaly Hayut. Sorry, we'll get it next time. I promise.
We will not.
No, you're probably right. But it's great to see Zinkernagel get on that score sheet. What's that, Tim?
Oh, I think it's like Hayut. It's like you don't really say the H, and I'm saying the H, and I don't know why. I've said his name before, and it didn't bother me this much. So here we are.
Yeah, it's cool to see Zinkernagel get on the score sheet within minutes of playing his first ever scrimmage. I saw that as a really positive sign because that's a pretty rare thing to do. On the flip side, also, of course, our homegrown Sergio Orgal scores the second goal in beautiful fashion. That time, I believe, it was 100% assisted by Dean, and it was off a nutmeg. So overall, a good win for the Fire. Guys like Brian Dowd, Chase Gasper, Marin, Suke, Hugo, Borso, Bamba, and Kwame didn't play. But anytime you're able to get a solid 2-0 win against an MLS opponent in preseason, it was a success. Similarly to Fortaleza, did you guys get a chance to hear about that game or see that game or watch the highlights? And what was your overall impression of the team coming off that win?
You mean SKC?
Yeah.
Okay. See, I'm glad. This is why we go through these reps in preseason with me and now you just misnaming clubs. And this is why we do this in the season. No, there's still some rust. It's all right.
You called Greg Frank earlier, too.
Who did? Tim?
Oh, oops.
Tim.
Oops. By the way, Frank has been hanging around.
They sat courtside at the game. Yeah, exactly.
They sat
courtside at the game. They're like they're the best, same player, same person.
Yeah. So the first, I'm going to tell the story here, but the first week in training, when they were at the not at their like new performance facility, but they were at what is it called? It's not Intuitive Sports, whatever. And no, I'm not gonna try to remember the name right now. The complex that the team built in Austin, or the foundation for the team helped build. Frank couldn't help himself. He was sitting on the bench sort of next to me for the first few minutes of training, and after a while, he got up and started like pacing the sideline, and like, you could tell he just was trying to coach inside of his head. So I don't think he's entirely giving that up, even though he is in the job that he said he wanted earlier. But yeah, I thought the Sporting KC win was good. I mean, now like SKC has not had the offseason that Greg Berhalter and company have had in terms of bringing in, exciting new players. Like at this point, it's like literally just like some dudes. Like,
Jovic too.
They just did. No, that's
from
not
LA
official
Galaxy.
yet, though. Yeah, but that's not official, and he did not play for them. The deal's not official; it's not done yet. Apparently, as of the time we're recording, it very well could be by then. But like the Fire were not facing a squad that is going to compete for trophies. Let's put it that way. But it's new coach, and SKC hasn't had a new coach since like Obama was president. So
literally.
Yeah, literally since Obama was president. And like not even late in his presidency either.
Since literally his first year in office. Like, yeah. Peter Vermes was hired, I think, literally right after he retired.
Yeah. And so it's not a new system. It's not a new coach. Every returning player, which is most of them, because they haven't made a lot of signings, knows exactly what Peter Vermees is expecting of them. So it was good to see the team do that. And I don't know how you guys felt. I was sort of expecting the Fire to win going into that match.
Yeah, that sounds
I agree.
right to me.
You got to beat Sporting KC if you want to compete. That's all I'm going to say. No dig against Sporting. They're no
and the Fire.
Oh no, dig against them. Absolutely, dig against them.
And the Fire, I don't think have been in a position where wins against Sporting Kansas City have been automatic for the past few seasons. So I think that just says something about the sort of vibe shift that we've expected from, or felt and sort of are expecting with Greg coming in.
Yeah, 100%. The expectation is to win those games, and that's what the Fire did. They finished 1-1 in West Palm, 50% win rate. I'll take it. They returned home to Chicago, got the train at the new Endeavor Health Center, which I have been just dying to see photo of. And Tim, you were there, and I'm sure you got to see some of the facility a little bit. One of the interesting tidbits coming out of that training camp back home is former U.S. men's national team center back Omar Gonzalez is training with the Fire. That's really all it is. He's getting some reps in. There's nothing really more than that. And I believe, Tim, we don't expect him to travel with the team to California, correct?
They said he was training for the week, and that's it. They said he was not a trialist, is what we were told. Now, I mean, some players are not trialists until they're signed. It's clear that Omar Gonzalez isn't ready to hang his cleats up yet. It's also clear that no team has jumped in and signed him. I mean, the Fire do need center back depth. It would not be the craziest thing if they did sign him. I don't think it's imminent. Again, that's another thing that we were able to ask Greg after training, and he said a lot about how good his veteran influence was on the squad. And I think that that's something that the team, has from some players like Kellen Acosta or Jack Elliott, but it's not. They don't have a guy that is nearly as experienced as Omar Gonzalez is anywhere. I guess the closest would probably be Philip Zinkernagel, but he's so new to the squad and new to the league and everything else. So yeah, I mean, still it was good to see him there. So I will say on Thursday when the team was training outside, he was outside in long pants, a jacket and a hat. Some of the younger Fire 2 players who I will not name were in shorts and a short sleeve chaining top and no layers whatsoever. So just goes to show.
That's how you know who's a homegrown and who's coming over from Europe, which is really funny to see because I know as a 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old living in Chicago that I would be the shorts and a t-shirt type of guy.
So in general, by people for wearing that in 40-degree weather. What are you doing wearing shorts and a t-shirt? It's like, I'm fat. What do you want from me?
Yeah, it sometimes it never leaves you. But you also live in Florida, so it's acceptable. We live in Chicago, where last week it was 1 degree, and people were probably still doing it because they're absolutely psycho. But in general,
I would be doing that.
Yeah, interesting to see Omer back in the fold. Always nice to see a long-term MLS face and a long-term U.S. men's national team guy as well. Over with the club, and we'll see if anything comes from there. But we do know that most likely we need a fourth center back, and hopefully that those are in the next couple weeks before the Fire kick off against Columbus. That's something they bring in. There are 21 days, I think, till the season starts. There's a lot of movement that could still happen. I think Triple G told media, including Tim, that there could potentially be 2 more signings, but that we also know that there could be some signings who leave the club. I'd be curious to know, at this point, 22 days out from the season, who do we think is most likely to leave? Obviously, Suke is going to be one of those flashing light ones that you're thinking of, but anyone else you're thinking about who could be on the outs before the season begins or early into the season? Start with Tim or DJ. Doesn't matter.
DJ, go ahead.
Go ahead, Tim. So I have 2 players right off the bat. It's Mueller and Duran. Mueller, just because that 4 laser game, I think, showed the problems that he's having, which is the injury messed him up. It just wrecked him. You can tell. I understand it's a case of it's 4 games. He's still getting into season form. Still, you watch the way he played that game and how bad it was, it's hard for me to say that he's going to be returning like anywhere near where he was. And with that, I think Mueller's probably the second buyout if they do use both in the preseason. On the other side, I say Duran. Oh, go ahead.
The Fire have not used a buyout yet.
Well, I mean, the first, assuming it's Suke.
Right. Okay.
But with Duran also, he's the guy that the question is, does someone in Europe swing in to sign him? Does someone go out of their way? And when do they? Obviously, we haven't heard anything publicly, but then again, we didn't hear anything publicly about Fede until literally like 3 days before. Gaston was literally 4 hours before. Like, I think it was 5 hours between when the guy tweeted that and the Fire announced that he was leaving.
So what's sort of funny about this is we're recording this on February 1st, but by the time this comes out, it very well could be around the time that the transfer window in most of the world is closed. It's already closed in a few places, including Saudi Arabia. So it is, I was going to make a joke about like, hey, maybe like Al Nasser are looking to get like a like strong physical center back from Colombia. But like they will not be able to do that until the summer at this point. So it'll be interesting to see, like, the fact that Duran hasn't been linked with anyone that closely. I mean, this front office has done a better job of keeping things close to their chest, but I do wonder, you know, I would be surprised if Duran moves because just how close we are to the beginning of the season and the fact that the team does need center back depth specifically. Now, like, we did sort of see that again with Fede, is, you know, where he departed at like basically a moment's notice from our perspective and then was replaced not long after. But it's getting later, which can be good or bad, right? Like, when the window closes in Europe, if there's a team that is looking to shed salary, doesn't believe that a player's future is with that club, and wants to see them move on, MLS is one of the only places that can sign them. But to answer the question about departures, I agree. Like, I mean, Suke doesn't belong in the team's plans, basically, going forward, according to what Greg Berhalter said. That's paraphrasing. I do want to point out, though, that he didn't train with the team in preseason last year and ended up sticking around with the team. So he has sort of done all this before, but I hope for his sake that he either is aware of the situation's gravity and is like working on a solution, or the team is aware of the situation and the timing of it, because if he's a free agent while the window is open, so if the team buys him out while the window's open, he can leave on a free to clubs in Europe, like including his native France. If the window's closed, in most countries, the registration date, like the registration deadline, closes at the same time. That's not universal. It doesn't in England and a couple other places, but that'll make it a lot harder for him to move on and go somewhere else, which is not the situation you want to, you know, put him in. Suke's biggest deal is that he's on a very expensive contract that his performance has never been able to match, but that's not his fault, right? You know, he loves it in Chicago, so there's no reason to wish him anything but well with hopefully a successful next stop, wherever that is.
Yeah, we know the roster's not complete. There could be some signings. There will be probably some departures. But they got 20 days to get that roster as close to ready as possible before they take on Columbus. What's next for the Fire? The Fire are planning to travel to California to play at Coachella Valley. They face off their next match, LAFC, on the 5th. So hopefully after this recording is coming out. Hopefully we get it out by the 5th. But they also got teams like Portland, San Jose, and then it appears to be a split scrimmage with Las Vegas Knights of the USL Championship and the LA Galaxy, the reigning MLS Cup champions. So 4 games still on the table for the preseason. A lot of guys who still need to get integrated. We don't know, as per typical MLS rules, if any of the streaming is going to happen. But we'll find out along the way, because that's part of the journey. A lot to be excited about in this land, a lot to be sad about, a lot to be happy about. But in general, feeling pretty good going into the month of February. And just rounding it out, I wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who's listening to this. There's going to be a lot more content coming out as the season gets closer. Probably go to a little bit more of a consistent schedule, a weekly schedule or something like that. So something to look forward to. Tim, DJ, where can we find you guys on socials? Tim.
Sing_electric on X and thotsy.bsky.social on Blue Sky.
I'm just at DJH2036 on Twitter.
Make sure to check out all the content that we've got on MinuteRed97.com if you don't already, which I know most of you do. But we will have articles coming out over the next week just covering like the team's preseason progress, updates to the depth chart and stuff like that. We should have salary cap info coming out closer to the start of the season. And we also, I just have, notes from the talk that we had with Greg Berhalter that came out yesterday, and there should be a piece on the conversation that we had with Philip Zinkernagel coming out in the next day or so as well.
Lots of good work over there by Alex, Tim, and the whole gang on the writing side. And you can listen to the latest edition of Live Hot Takes, which should absolutely be posted by the time you guys are listening to this on Spotify, Apple, Google. A lot of awesome content, a lot of awesome banter going on in that show. And we will have another live one at the end of this month, probably around February 27th. Lot to look forward to. You could find me at mshabes, that's MSHABES, on Twitter, Instagram, whatever, TikTok. I'm kind of a micro influencer. And of course, please follow Men in Red 97 on all of the socials if you're not already, including MIR97 Pods, home of the Bonfire, Quickfire, and Hot Takes. That's all we got for you guys. Thank you all for listening, your support. We're so grateful for your support, and we'll see you in a couple weeks with some more updates. Come on, you Men in Red.
Vamos.
Let's go, baby.
Fire.